Hello and welcome back. So finished the body now, or finished most of the body. Starting to think about the neck. I've got a piece of wood. This is a piece of mahogany, or sapelli, however you pronounce it, and it's just a little bit longer than I need, and it's got the right width for the headstock on it. And it's come as this one section, and it's planed on. Looks like it's planed on two sides. The first thing I need to do is to see just how flat it is, because chances are it isn't. So let's pan you down. What I've got here is it's an old piece of worktop, but generally they're pretty flat. So I can see that all the way around I've got a bit of a wobble there. So it's not completely flat. Okay, so I'm going to need to plane that down a little bit. I'll also check to see how square it is. The other thing I can do is take a straight edge and put it across. So actually lengthwise, it's not too bad. It's when you put it diagonally, you can see that there's a bow in the middle. So it's slightly warped. It's fairly flat lengthways, but very slightly warped in this direction. There we go. You can see I can move that without it scraping. So essentially to lose a bit off these two corners, but a very little bit. And I think this is a good opportunity to show you the workbench that I use. This is just simply a piece of old kitchen worktop that I rescued from a kitchen. You can actually buy it, it's relatively cheap as well, and the beauty of it is it's pretty flat, nice and smooth and non-stick. Now this is a big bit that I've got, but let me show you the main one that I use, which is this one. It's a slightly smaller and easier to handle. But what I've done, you can see, if I don't drop it on the floor, I've screwed a piece of wood onto the back of it, so it's pretty solid. And the reason I've done that is that I mount it on top of a workmate. So I can put that in place, do up the little things like that, and I've got a pretty solid work table. So I've now taken the mahogany block and I've put it through the planer a couple of times just to give me a nice plain surface on all the sides. And you can see on the one side here there's a bit of a ridge, because that's where it drops a little bit. But I'm going to leave that because I don't want to plane off any more than I have to. The main flat face here I've marked with the customary, and you see that just marked with the customary right angle, so we know that that's the face to work off. So I've printed out the front view and the side view of the neck. Now just double check that they both line up. And what I've done, now that I know that the thickness here of my wood is not thick enough to accommodate the end piece, so I know that I'm going to have to double up the wood at the end to be able to get the headstock out of it. Looking at the front end, I'm also going to need to do the same with that, so I'm going to need a chunk at the front. Now I'm not sure that I've got enough wood in this block to do that, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to try and play a few games trying to figure out what I can get away with. So at the front here I need that much. I'm going to have to do some calculating and measurement to see how much of this I need to block up the back. So now I've chopped this block off and it should fit on the end like this. So this is the back side, the side with the rough. So this side here is my plain flat surface. It's going to be where the fretboard fits. So that can go like that. And what I need to do is glue that onto there so that I've got the depth there, which is going to allow me to cut the headstock. Now, turns out I don't have enough wood to do the little bit on the front as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the bit for the headstock, and I'm hoping that there's enough left there to just stick on this end again to give me the other end. Hopefully, we'll see. So gluing them together, it should be playing nice and flat, and there shouldn't be any rocking or motion at all in that, because you want a nice clean joint all the way. If you have gaps, then it'll be gaps when you start to cut it off and it'll look a mess. So do that, and I'm feeling that's pretty solid. It's not rocking at all. If I flip it over, then there's a small amount of rock on there, which I do not want. So the surface that I've planed should be absolutely flat and smooth, and let me glue them. And just using aliphatic, just going to put that on the gluing surfaces, again making sure not to get them mixed up. Oh, a fair amount of glue, doesn't matter if a bit of it squeezes out, and then find something suitable to spread it out with, or your finger if you don't mind getting it covered in glue. Okay, nice decent amount, because again I'm going to be playing in this anyway, so it doesn't matter if it squeezes out. Having said that, I don't want oodles of the stuff. Right, that could go there. That then just goes into place where I just tried it, and we can then apply some pressure using some clamps. And there we are. I'm going to let that dry overnight and come back to it in the morning. It's the next day, so glue's dried. Let's take these clamps off. I did them fairly tight because I know, and I didn't use any extra bits of wood to protect this because I know I'm going to cut this away anyway. So there we are. Seems to have made a good job. Now the next thing is to just plane the edges of this to make them nice and square and flat, and take off any differences where I haven't quite got this square. So there we are, transferred from the plan. You can see, can you make that out? You can see on the other side, you can see that I've marked out the bit where the headstock goes. Double check the angles, test it against the template as well, so that all works. So the next step, take the bandsaw, I'm going to chop off this side of the block. Now what I found is that this is too wide to fit into my bandsaw. Perils of having a cheap bandsaw. So I've chopped it down a little bit down the length, as you can see, and I don't have a saw. My circular saw is not wide enough to do that either, so I'm going to have to get a hand saw, and I'm going to have to chop that extra bit off to make the whole thing thin enough to fit in. There we go. That is now hopefully thin enough to fit in a bandsaw. And what I'll do, give that a quick plane off as well, just to make sure that it's all smooth. So here we go, onto the bandsaw. I'm going to cut it with a good margin, because what can happen if the saw is slightly off centre, I've measured it so it is square, if it's slightly off, what can happen is you get diagonal and you cut off too much. So if we do this very carefully and give a good 5 or 6 mil here, then hopefully it won't dig in and it'll be all fine. There you go, there's the first angle cut. It's nice and square. It's nice and square across here as well, so that's good. The next thing I can do, I can plane that down when I need to make it the right shape. But what I'm more interested in is this block that I've taken off, because this will hopefully fit on here to make up for the bit where it's too thin. And here we are, check the block against the template, trimmed it down a little bit. This is the bit that was left over. Now making sure I line up the grain, I don't want to put it in diagonal. That should be enough. I stick that on the end. That should cover me for what it needs to be. And we go from there. So I'll glue this on exactly the same way. So I'll just put a load of glue on there and clamp it together. So now that we've got this bit done, we've got that bit stuck on and it's glued in place, and I've just planed off the sides to make it square. Next thing is to think about this, as we cut this on the bandsaw, so you can see it's still a bit rough. So the next thing to do is plane this down to the line. We've got the line there, so I'm going to mark the line on both sides because I've cut it off on the other side. And then what we can do is clamp that into the workmate, which is why they're so useful, like that. That sort of angle, so it's essentially flat. Do it up, there we go, that, and then we can just plane that flat, just like that. Okay, so that is done. Plane that down to the line, because I check it with a ruler to make sure it's completely flat, both directions, which it is. So that is now ready to be made into a headstock. And the next thing to do, now I've got that angle, is to take the piece off the bottom here. So what I'll do is I'll take the bandsaw and I'll cut up first of all to give me a piece, and then I'll slice downwards there, and that piece will come off. And again, I'll leave a good 5mm or so to plane off at the end. Here we are, looking a lot more like a headstock. The back of the headstock's always that much more difficult to do because you can't get a plane in. You don't really want to go across because it'll split out. And luckily we haven't cut the shape yet, so it's good to do this before you cut the shape in case it does split out, because you have to go essentially diagonal a little bit with a little block plane. So it's taken ages, but finally that's done. Okay, it's the right thickness and that's nice and smooth. I might now just mark out a little bit on this end and trim that back a little bit, but otherwise we're ready to start thinking about the next phase, which is to mark out and start to cut the channel, because we're going to put a truss rod in here. Now the proper Gibson truss rod, there's a curve that goes from here up, so as you tighten it, it pulls the neck back. I'm not going to do that. That is too much like hard work to get that curved groove. It means I have to make a jig for the router and dig it to just the right depth. So what I do is put a more modern two-way one on. So it'll go, this end will be the adjuster. So we'll drill a hole through there. I'll cut a channel down the middle, exact fit for the rod, which will then go in the middle. And then we'll put the fretboard on top of it. Just marking that then. I've stuck the template on with some tape. I'm just going to mark out here. So I've marked out in pencil the bits that protrude here, and then I'm just going to take a sharp knife. I'm just going to mark that curve in. Don't have to do the whole thing, but just going to mark that there, and that will give me a line to cut to. And then there's one inside here, and then one more down here. So that's it, loads of bandsawing done. We've got a profile of the end, it's very, very approximate. There's still bits to come out of that. There's the end part, and I've also cut all the way down here to give me an approximate thickness of the neck. Now, obviously I've left a good 5 or 6mm beyond where it needs to be, and you can see some of that in here so that I can bring it down later as I carve the neck. But that's the approximate shape that we're looking for. Obviously this is still square, and it's square so that we can have something square to cut that channel for the truss rod. But most of the bandsawing is done. You could probably do this without a bandsaw, but it's going to be a hell of a job with a handsaw. But there we are. That is now ready to start the next phase. So we've got the neck blank. We've taken it from a piece of wood to something that's starting to look like the rough shape of a guitar neck. So I think that's plenty for this time. So next time round, we're going to be looking at cutting the headstock shape and also cutting the channel ready for the truss rod. So that'll be next time. So I hope this one was useful. I hope it was interesting. If you liked it, give me a like. Don't forget to press subscribe, and maybe I'll see you next time.